Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this planning committee. Our first agenda item is the election of chairperson. So can I please have any nominations for chairperson? Thank you. Councillor Jones.
I would like to nominate Councillor Chrissy Stamp. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Okay. Can I please take a vote as to whether Councillor Chrissy Stamp will become chairperson? Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's 13. That's carried. So welcome, Councillor Stamp, if you'd like to come up.
Thank you for electing me as chairperson of Planning Committee. It's very much appreciated. I now call for nominations for vice chairperson. Yep.
Councillor Mark Jones.
Okay, is that seconded?
Seconded, yeah. I'll second that, please, Councillor Stamp.
Okay, thank you. Those for Councillor Jones as vice chairperson.
That's 13.
Okay.
That's 13, Chair.
And those against? Councillor Jones is elected as vice chairperson. Thank you. Right. I will now continue with the remainder of the meeting. Item 2 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies of absence? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Golvin has sent his apologies, and I was expecting Councillor Joy as his sub.
Right, item 3 on the agenda, is the record of the meeting held on the 14th of February approved? Right, we now move on to item 4 on the agenda. Are there any urgent matters by reason of special circumstances? Okay, thank you. Item 5, do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? Councillor Etheridge.
Julie has already got a written statement from me that she can use on this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other member? Okay. Right, before continuing with the remainder of the agenda, is it agreed that Councillor Campbell can speak on agenda item 8 as a ward member and for this planning application to be next on the agenda? Thank you. Right, we will therefore now move on to agenda item 8, planning application for 112 Maidstone Road, Chatham, construction of a detached dwelling. Chantel is going to present this item, so over to you, Chantel.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good evening, members. Right. This application is for the construction of a 3-bedroom dwelling rear of 112 Maidstone Road with access via Scott's Terrace. This is the location plan here. Moving on to a second site location, just demonstrating where 112 is, surrounded with the blue, and the site in the red. Moving on to the existing site conditions, the site currently comprises of a double garage for the occupants of 112 Maidstone Road, and Scott's Terrace is characterised by a single row of Victorian terraces to the east and garages and retaining boundary walls to the west, which is where the proposal site is located. Going on to some photos, so as you can see here, that is 112 Maidstone Road from left to right, looking down at the garden towards where the proposed dwelling will be, and then back up towards the existing property at 112, and then towards the neighbouring boundary on the final photo there. Thank you. Going on to some photos of Scott's Terrace, so you can see the double garage there and the retaining walls that I mentioned, and then some shots of the street scenes. You can see the Victorian terrace just there. Moving on to the proposed site layout. This slide demonstrates the proposed site layout with the associated garden and 2 parking spaces to front, and the landscaping proposed as well. This site layout also demonstrates the relationship between the proposed dwelling, 112 Maidstone Road, and the properties within Scott's Terrace. Moving on to the elevations of the proposed dwelling. The design takes into consideration architectural details of the properties within Scott's Terrace, including the arched lintels and the lintels above the windows there. The dwelling also replicates the gable end roof design, which is present within Scott's Terrace. The dwelling is of modest size, taking into consideration the scale of the dwelling at 112 Maidstone Road, which you can just about see in that first image on the left. And yeah, they are considering to use matching materials to the dwellings within Scott's Terrace to further blend the new dwelling within the street scene. The dwelling is arranged internally as a hallway, WC, an open plan living, kitchen and dining room at ground floor, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom and a walk-in wardrobe at first floor, together with a master bedroom with ensuite and dressing room within the loft space, which is served by the rear dormer. Finally, just going on to some site sections, just to demonstrate again the relationship between 112 and those properties within Scott's Terrace. The site sits within an urban area of Chatham, where infilling and backland development is permitted, subject to it not causing harm to the character of the area, neighbouring amenity or highways function or safety. The proposal is situated significant distances away from the dwellings on Scott's Terrace and that of 112 Maidstone Road, so there are no concerns in terms of loss of privacy or overlooking. I understand that objections have been raised in relation to the demolition of the garage and the construction phase of the proposal. Condition 5 would require them to submit a construction environmental management plan prior to the commencement of the development to ensure sufficient measures are in place to protect neighbouring amenity. In terms of parking, the proposal does facilitate 2 off-road parking spaces, which is in line with Medway parking standards. Also, the loss of the garage, which is currently used for storage, would not impact parking provisions for the occupants of 112 Maidstone Road, as the dwelling boasts a large front parking area that can accommodate several cars. The proposed dwelling is of sufficient size for a 3-bedroom property and would provide adequate amenity space for future occupants in accordance with policy. Therefore, it is considered that the proposal would result in an improvement to the street scene, reducing the bulk of the vast concrete presently on site and introducing an attractive dwelling that relates well to the character of the area, respecting the adjacent conservation area and the dwellings within Scott's Terrace. The proposal would provide a family home which would not result in detrimental impact on neighbouring amenity or parking provisions. As such, subject to the conditions listed within the officer's report, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chantel. Councillor Campbell, you now have 5 minutes to speak as a ward member. I think you can see the time up on the screen in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for having me here, committee. So on this issue, I was contacted by a couple of residents and I conducted a site visit myself. I went to Scott's Terrace and I've spoken to multiple residents. So based on what I've learned, to start off, I strongly disagree with the assertion that adequate notice was given to neighbours who would be affected by this plan. Were it not for the watchfulness of one particular resident, people on Scott's Terrace would not have been aware and would not have had the opportunity to raise the objections they did raise. So from what I understand, notices were given to adjoining properties on Maidstone Road through the doors, but not on Scott's Terrace. This, to me, is unacceptable because the impact of all of this, including the entrance to the properties on Scott's Terrace. So I don't feel that requirement has been fulfilled at all. In terms of how it was secured on a garage handle, which is about waist level for me, not clearly visible to people who were passing by. It came untethered, and it was found lying on the street by my resident. And if he hadn't found that, hadn't accidentally spotted it, they would not have known about this. So yes, I strongly say that your requirements have not been fulfilled in terms of notice to residents. In terms of Scott's Terrace itself, it's a very narrow street. For the number of terraced houses on that property, there's very, very limited parking bays. And there are a couple of disabled parking bays, which I think it's really important to take into consideration. Now, already there is only one road that can access Scott's Terrace. That's through Hills Terrace next to the station, Chatham station, and then a tiny section of Dale Street. On the other side, Dale Street is blocked off with a barrier in the road. So there is only one narrow access to Scott's Terrace. Now, Hills Terrace is already a traffic nightmare because of a school there, and during school times, it's impassable. And there's only space for one vehicle to come up the road on Scott's Terrace, and it's an end of the road, it's a close. I know it says in the report that some kind of construction management plan will be in place, but my residents and I don't have any confidence that it can be managed in any way that people can still access Scott's Terrace with their cars. How can that happen when you have big construction vehicles and delivery vehicles coming up such a narrow street? And I'm especially concerned how those disabled bays will be lost to residents. So no matter how you look at it, the construction phase is going to cause some serious and unacceptable impact on residents, especially disabled ones. What's also not considered is the impact of visitors visiting this new dwelling. So fair enough, 2 parking spaces, off-road parking has been provided for with the new plan, but what about visitors? It's inevitable, and where are they going to park? So there's no consideration for that. What my residents told me in very stark terms was that all the consideration seemed to have been given to the Maidstone Road side of the plans, how it looks, the appearance of it, and how it adds to the value of that, but not enough or any consideration has been given to Scott's Terrace people. They actually told me they don't feel their welfare matters to Medway Council because they feel that if they are in an emergency situation needing fire or ambulance services, that they won't be able to be reached in a timely fashion because of the way the road already is. And what we're proposing with this is to make it worse. So, although technical details seem to have been checked off in the report, I think in a real life scenario, if you were to go to the site and speak to the residents and actually think about the day-to-day life the residents are living and how it'll impact them, I don't feel this is a suitable location. And I really disagree with the assertions in the report that there'll be no adverse impact on parking and local amenities, or that this is a suitable location. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I now open the floor to members. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you. On page 45, halfway down, there is a recommendation that the permitted development rights to be removed for further outbuildings and extensions to the dwelling, along with ensuring there is recommended conditions to ensure that this remains a residential property and not ever becoming an HMO or a business property. During the summing up by Councillor Jones, could I request that those recommendations now become conditions, please, if this application is approved? Thank you.
Yeah, Dave, over to you.
Chairman, thank you very much. Councillor Etheridge is absolutely right that there is those conditions are really, really important, and indeed they are already covered by conditions 11 and 12, because as the Councillor Etheridge says, they are very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hellcross-Scott.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. And I would like to endorse Councillor Etheridge's comment, but I would also like to suggest that as a committee, we do a site visit. And that's because I Googled it, but fortunately, back from physio today, I had a chance to have a look. And being a bit morphine brain, I was looking for Scots Road, not Scots Terrace, but I got there. And I will echo what Councillor Campbell said, really. You know, it's not just because I'm a disabled woman, but it's really tight there. And my worry is, we are an ageing population in Medway. So it's for our senior citizens, our disabled people, and also parents with buggies or prams. There's a worry there. Parking is a big worry. Infrastructure worries me because it seems very densely populated already. Effect on existing trees, and I nearly took some pictures, but my phone wasn't charged because it does look a bit of a hazardous site, as Councillor Campbell's already mentioned. So I would request a site visit, please, Chair.
Right, thank you. Councillor Bowen.
There's a car park at the end of Scots Terrace. I was just wondering if any arrangements could be made for the residents to be able to use that.
Chantel.
That car park already serves the flats that are located at the end of Scots Terrace.
Is there any other member? Councillor Peake.
Yeah, just wondering out loud, I presume there's no actual planning requirement to accommodate. What we know will happen is that there will be people visiting. So whilst 2 allocations seems appropriate, considering how narrow this is, it is a problem waiting to happen. But I presume that's not part of planning, that we have to have accommodation for potential visitors parking.
Dave, would you like to come back on that?
Chairman, thank you very much. Just like to come back on a few points, because Councillor Campbell has quite well explained what the site's like, and it is really, really tight there. I went there at school dropping off, picking up time, so I understand all the points that Councillor Campbell has rightly explained, and I understand the nervousness of residents there. If I can reassure them, though, this application has been very, very carefully considered by my officers. The point in relation to car parking is recognised, and as Chantal has described in relation to this scheme, there won't be any loss of on-street car parking as a result of this, because you can't park, it's a garage, so you can't park immediately in front of that garage. In terms of other residents, but visitors to that property could park there because they're visiting that property. So there's the 2 parking spaces on site, which would accord with our parking standards, and then they could have that visitor space on the road in front of it. As Councillor Campbell has rightly pointed out, it's a CPZ parking zone in the area, so visitors couldn't park in the area, and the occupier of the property would need to make that very clear to visitors about those parking restrictions. It's an important point. I think the other important point that Councillor Campbell has made is in relation to the nervousness on the construction in relation to this site. Because if construction it takes place from Scots Terrace, that will cause problems. Chantel has rightly advised that we've got a construction environmental management plan, and through that, we will try to limit the impact on neighbours as a result of the development. A possibility here, and the residents have suggested this in their representations, is that construction comes from Maidstone Road through the site. And I think that's a sensible suggestion. What we could do then is include an informative on the decision notice, which says that in agreeing the construction environmental plan, that we would expect that to be part of it. So very clearly to the applicant who lives in 112 Maidstone Road, that if he or she wants to sell off the plot, there is still that recognition that construction will come via Maidstone Road, because I think that's a really important point that the residents have made. And it's just really reassuring the residents that we have very, very carefully considered street scene, impact on them from the construction and also the final development. But in relation to your point, Councillor Peake, it goes back to the visitors could park on the road because there is that space there in front of those two car parking spaces, but also the occupier would need to make it clear to any visitors about the restrictions in that area. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. So Councillor Nestorov.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to ask a couple of questions of clarification to make things clear. I am also not happy, just to reiterate Councillor Campbell's words, I'm also not happy that there was not enough consultation and not enough letters posted. In cases like that, is there something that the council could do, that when there is not enough consultation before they start actually building? Second question, it's more like a concern actually. If more developments are approved on the same road, the road amenity, the parking spaces will be totally inadequate to accommodate. So my point is, if everyone starts developing their gardens at the back of the gardens, and a new line of terrace houses appears there won't be enough space for the current residents. And the third one, because I'm looking on Google Maps, there is a road called Gabriel Muse that it might be possible to get construction material through that road to Scott's Terrace. I'm just putting it out there. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Dave, did you want to answer that one?
Chairman, if you're happy for me to take it, Chantal, yeah. Chairman, in relation to the consultation, I can categorically say that the consultation was in accordance with our adopted practice. So we did consult with residents in accordance with our statement of community involvement in Scott's Terrace. It wouldn't have been the whole terrace. Our practice is to put a site notice up and to consult those properties with an adjoining boundary. So if you take out the road, the adjoining boundary would be those properties immediately opposite. Now, I appreciate again what Councillor Campbell said, that the site notice may have come off. But I think where I would come from there is, were residents able to make their comments on this application for members to consider by this, at this committee? And we have received 9 letters of objection to this, covering the issues that residents want to raise. So I feel that members have got all the information they need in front of them to deal with it. But as I said, the consultation was in accordance with our adopted practice. In relation to car parking and your point about precedent and other applications, each application would need to be dealt with on its merits. In relation to this application and on car parking, as Chantal has explained, there is an existing double garage on this site. So existing residents and Scott's Terrace can't park in front of that garage. So as a result of this development, there will be no loss of car parking for existing residents in Scott's Terrace. If any other application came forward in that street, we would need to consider it on its merits. And if they came forward with a scheme which impacted on existing parking in that terrace, which, as Councillor Campbell says, is pretty tight, then that would be a concern that we would have to look very, very carefully at. But in relation to this case, it doesn't impact on existing car parking, and each application needs to be considered on its merits. And then on the Gabriel Muse point, I think Chantel's point, which she said to me beforehand, which I advised, if we have an informative which says that construction vehicles shouldn't use Scott's Terrace, but should come via Maidstone Road, I think that covers that point and that very valid concern. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Is there any other members? Councillor Hamadishe?
Yeah, thank you. My only question is to do with the construction. Are there any measures or controls we can put in place to ensure construction's done at a time least obstructive to the residents locally?
Chantel, if you'd like to answer that, thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. The Construction Environmental Management Plan would require them to submit hours of operation, amongst other details as to when and where they intend to construct the property. So that would be covered under that.
If I could just come back to that. So is that conducive to the requirements for the residents, or is it just like a blanket document? Like who sets what that really means? Because everything has to be measured on its own merits, really, and you can see that parking there is already tight. You know, then you've got the school hours and all that kind of stuff. How much flexibility is in the actual plan to mitigate disruption to the local residents?
That's fine. So with this application, because the house is being built into the bank, a lot of it won't be done by machinery. It's going to have to be a lot of hand dug proposal, and that also relates to the trees within the site. So on the condition, I think it's condition 4, mentions it as well in relation to a method statement to do with the arboricultural method statement and tree protection measures. So that's relevant as well, and that will need to be covered within the SEMP as well. So it's not that there'll be lots of machinery going in and out of the site, because they do need to provide measures to facilitate the trees as well. So a lot of it will be hand dug. That answers the question. Helps.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I've got 2 questions. If I can come back to the second one. The first one was the acoustics are very bad in here, and I thought I heard Councillor Howcroft-Scott ask for a site visit. So can I ask first what your view is on that, Chair? Should we be taking a vote for a site visit, a deferral for a site visit?
Sorry. Okay, Dave.
Chairperson, sorry, before you come back on that, what I would just say for members, you can have a debate if you want on terms of whether you wish to go for a site visit, but a visit should only be to achieve information which you can't achieve through Chantel's presentation or through the Google Street View or the presentation that Chantel has explained tonight. So it's, you know, there should be a purpose in terms of a site visit. Sorry, Chairperson.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Personally, I think that we've gained enough information from the presentation. I have actually been there to see it myself, but I can see that you want to speak, Councillor Howcroft-Scott.
Yeah, if we're not going to go for a site visit, could we be, Chantel, a bit more in line with Councillor Amadishi in terms of making sure that we sort of not have a blockade, but have restrictions when the school, because I was there when it was school kicking out time, and it really was, in my opinion, an accident waiting to happen, really. So that, you know, even if they are hand digging out, they're going to need sand, shingle, blocks, bricks. So deliveries and such do not take place between 8 and 10 in the morning or between 2 and 5 at night. Something like that, please.
Thank you. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah, okay. So, I mean, what's the feeling in the room? Does anyone feel that a site visit is necessary? Did you want to vote on it or no? Yeah, personally, I went out there today and from what I saw, my concern was to do with the parking because it's single yellow on one side outside the terraces and the parking is on the other side of the road. But I feel that we've been reassured that there isn't actually going to be any parking lost, and for any future applications that will be looked at if parking is to be lost. Is there any other member that would like to speak?
Chair, I just wanted to come back on part 2, if I may. I wasn't going to raise this if we were going to defer the application, but can I just be clear then the Chief Planning Officer is agreeing to an informative to be put on construction times and access via Maidstone Road, Chatham, so as I'll be quite clear in my mind what the committee is moving.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Absolutely, what we will agree within the construction environmental management plan condition will, as Chantal says, cover hours of construction, but we will specifically look at if they have to do any deliveries or anything from Scott's Terrace, then they do not take place within certain hours for the very points that Councillor Howcroft Scott and Councillor Campbell have said in terms of those school dropping off and picking up times because of the difficulties there. But we will also include an informative which says that there will be an expectation in the construction environmental plan that as much as possible should take place via Maidstone Road. So that will be, we're looking for an informative to cover that. Is that okay, Councillor Jones?
Right, any other member? Councillor Maidstone.
Thank you, Chair. Just in regards to the informative, my concern is, bear in mind the narrowness of the street and it's got no turning circle. If works does have to be done on Scott's Terrace, it's done as swiftly as possible because anything that is left there for a particularly long period of time, a skip, any construction equipment, etc., if an ambulance or a fire engine are required to go down Scott's Terrace, you've also got, you know, there's at least 2, possibly 3 street lights that I can see, plus you're also going to have cars and everything else. That work's done as quickly as possible. So, you know, should anything horrible happen, that emergency service vehicles can actually get down the road should they need to.
Chairperson, if it's okay, I think members' concerns regarding construction is absolutely right and critical because of the school and because of how narrow that is. And we will be looking very carefully at that SEMP. One of the things that we will require is a contact phone number so that if there are any difficulties that residents are able to contact someone. We will also be encouraging or making sure that the builders of this communicate with those local residents and the ward councillor, particularly if there is if they do have to come via Scott's Terrace anyway, that is communicated early to those residents and the ward councillor, so that it can be mitigated as much as possible. So really good points from members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chairperson. My question was very similar to the colleague across the other side, because with the sort of deliveries that you may have in Scott's Terrace, I can imagine anything that's unloaded, you know, sort of bricks, ballast, whatever, is going to impinge on the road. I know Scott's Terrace actually because I have been there, and it's very narrow, you know. So where to put it other than on the road and making an obstruction when the vehicle's, you know, left?
Okay, yeah, Dave.
Chairperson, totally understand those concerns. And when I said that there may be occasions that they have to come from Scott's Terrace, as Chantal says, that might be particular equipment that needs to come along there in order to get on the site. Deliveries of materials, the storage of those, I see those coming from Maidstone Road and not on Scots Terrace. Because it's a really good point that members have made. We don't want those materials stored on Scots Terrace.
Right, thank you. Any other member? Councillor Peake.
I just want to say out loud my concern. Whilst I can't actually think of any grounds to turn this down on planning grounds, that's what we're here to do, I do feel quite alarmed because, as Councillor Campbell said, I think this is a accident way to happen. At some time way in the future, you get, people can be so ignorant in their behaviour. I just imagine there could be a situation where more than one visitor's turned up, so you've got blockage, and they don't care where they block other people in. An accident happens, and an ambulance can't get down there, or whatever, because it's that narrow, and it concerns me for what it's worth. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Peake. Is there any other member? No, I now hand over to the Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Move approval of the planning application with conditions 1 to 15 as set out in the report, noting in particular condition 5 on construction, environmental plan, conditions 11 and 12 on permitted development, and an informative to be put on the application as regards deliveries via Scots Terrace. Can I ask, Chair, in view of the number of concerns that have been expressed by members, that the wording of the informative be run past the Chair, Vice Chair and spokespersons? Would that be a reasonable request? The Chief Planning Officer's nodding, so I will ask that the informative be put on about deliveries via Maidstone Road rather than Scots Terrace, and that the wording, exact wording, to be agreed between the Chair, Vice Chair and spokespersons with the Chief Planning Officer. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. The recommendation is for approval with conditions. Those four. Oh, no, sorry. Sorry, I need to, is that seconded? Thank you. All right. Right, sorry. The recommendation is for approval with conditions. Those four.
That's 13, Chair.
And those against?
That's 1, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Cheers.
Chairperson, can I possibly...
Right. Right. We're now going to move on to item 6 on the agenda, planning application for 264 St Margaret's Banks, Rochester. Peter is going to present this application. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Where's my little pointer? There we go. This application site relates to a mid-terrace property within Rochester. You can see it there outlined in red. It's located within the Star Hill to Sunpier conservation area. And you'll see it's relatively close to the railway line, which is where the bridge goes over the high street there. Property's 264 St Margaret's Banks, and is on this elevated area above the high street. And this is the front view of the property, and again you can see it at that sort of elevated level. The application is part retrospective and is for the excavation and creation of a basement area below the existing dwelling. So the photographs here show the back of the house. One of the only changes to the fabric of the house itself is the installation of these bifold doors there. And then the excavated area below is creating the basement area, which you can see from the drawings here, which is outlined in green. Those are the doors that you saw on the previous photograph. So you can see that the width of the basement is essentially the width of the house, and again it goes underneath the existing property. Many of the concerns that have been raised as part of the application process and the representations received relate to the structural elements of the basement creation and concerns about its stability. Those matters are not strictly planning matters to be considered as part of this application, and are matters for building control. But on that basis, and to give members that reassurance, the building control is being dealt with by STG, which are the Council's shared building control service with Canterbury, Gravesham and Swale Borough Councils. And there has been a number of inspections by building control officers to ensure that those structural elements are being adhered to at each stage of the project. In terms of the planning side, the main consideration with this is obviously you've got, because it's in the conservation area, the impact on that conservation area and the heritage considerations of that. The conservation officer has been consulted and has assessed the impact on the conservation area and has deemed that no harm to the conservation area exists from the proposals. So he's happy that there will be no impact on the conservation area itself. Because the majority of the development is sort of below ground level, in terms of impact on neighbours, obviously there's no impact in terms of privacy or overshadowing, because it's a below ground development rather than one that could cause overshadowing from what one would typically assess an extension on. So in terms of those key planning considerations, they are deemed to be acceptable, and the recommendation is that approval be granted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any members? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you. Thank you for your report, because it's extremely difficult to ascertain the size of this proposal from the report we have in front of us. It says it's 3 metres deep, but it doesn't say the actual size of the room, and indeed it's exactly the same for the terrace outside the bifold doors. There doesn't seem to be anything there in condition-wise to stop noise vibrating from this wall, because I'm assuming if they're having a cinema room that you can view from outside on a terrace, we're looking at a mini IMAX type system with the appropriate sound system with it. So once again, there's nothing in there in terms of stopping noise pollution going into opposing properties or vibration. I wonder if you could give me an update on any of that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter, you?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the noise from essentially the finished use of the property, that would be looked at in terms of essentially the tanking of the basement itself. And once you do that, to ensure it's watertight and weathertight, and it has the appropriate insulation into meet building regs in order for it to be used as more habitable accommodation, then those elements of sort of noise transfer would be the same as it would be from ground floor room to ground floor room on a terrace property. So in that regard, those elements would be examined through that building control procedure. In terms of the, and I'm not sure whether Councillor Etheridge was alluding to as part of the question, was in terms of the noise during construction, and the applicant has paused construction at this time in order for the application process to be undertaken. And there is condition 4 again, which is similar to the condition members discussed on the previous application in terms of the construction environmental management plan, and that will deal with construction times and to minimise any construction noise and disturbance through the remainder of the period. Although I was there today, and I would say probably 90% of the excavation has already been undertaken. So in terms of that ongoing disturbance for residents as part of the process, it's probably the tail end of that now, members. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Peake.
Thank you. Sorry if you said something and I didn't hear it. I'm really struggling in this place. It does concern me in the report where it says objections on foreign grounds that the development commenced without consent, and I think you've just recognised that. I mean, can anything be done about that? Because that is something from when I used to be in planning before, way back in time, where I was before. I think we ended up with in that borough. The borough itself got a reputation, oh, it doesn't matter, we get away with it because it's not enforced. And I would hate that to happen here. And it does actually wind me up when people do things like this because of the lack of consideration. Also about construction being undertaken by someone unqualified. Now, obviously in most cases, if you have private property and you do a bodge job, that's up to you. But if we do actually generally care about conserving buildings that should be conserved, then surely that's an issue as well. Actually, it was just those 2 points because they are repeated also by the City of Rochester Society. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, retrospective applications, I think, are a particular frustration of almost everybody who's involved in planning, and certainly over the 20 plus years I've been in planning, it is a cause of frustration. There are a variety of reasons why applications are submitted retrospectively. In this case, there is an argument that a lot of the works could be undertaken under permitted development rights, and it is a very grey area as to when that spills out into requiring planning permission. So it's by no means a cut and dry case in every situation. I think it's also important for members to recognise and sort of remember that the Town and Country Planning Act allows for the submission of retrospective applications. Section 73A of the Act specifically allows the submission of retrospective applications. So it's something that's there within the legislation in order to regularise works which have been undertaken without planning consent. Now, any change to that would require changes to the legislation at government level rather than at local level. And I think you're always, or one is always in a situation where it would be sort of probably unfair on some people if you put a blanket ban on retrospective applications, because there are always the occasions where someone does something by accident or someone is advised poorly that permission isn't required. So it is a situation that we have to deal with the application. We have to deal with it in a way that essentially discounts the fact that it's retrospective and make that same decision and that same recommendation on those planning merits rather than on whether or not work has been done without consent. And in terms of the second point about the sort of qualifications of the individual, I think that it's not for the planning department or the planning committee to make a judgment on the experience or otherwise of an applicant to undertake work. I think the key point is that the work is overseen by building control officers, and in that regard I have quite a lot of comfort because they are using the council's shared building control service. So, thank you.
Okay, Dave's just going to come back in on that as well.
Chairperson, thank you very much. I just wanted to come back in on a point that you made, Councillor Peake, which relates to Peter's first response there, and your worry about a previous authority that you were at, where there was a reputation that if someone put in a retrospective application, they would get away with it and so on. And I understand those comments, and Peter is 100% right in what he said in terms of some retrospective applications do happen quite innocently, and people don't realise that they're doing anything wrong, and that does happen. But what we don't want is for the very thing that you've said, that it gets out that the council is lax in relation to enforcement, and therefore there's an encouragement for people, well, to try it on. So the very people, not saying this person at all, but others to do that, to do the retrospective and then put the application. And that is why one of the things that I like to do is where we do take enforcement action, we publicise that and make it very clear that if someone does something without planning permission, particularly with an intention there, and that then it is refused planning permission, we will take enforcement action. And some councillors, possibly Councillor Etheridge here, will remember there was a property in Finsbury, I think it is, or certainly in Strood, where we were there with the bulldozers to knock down an extension that someone had done the very thing that you're fearful of. And so it's very important to me that we make it very clear that we will take action.
Thank you, Dave. Sorry, did you want to come back on that, Councillor
Yeah,
Peake?
just very quickly, could you just talk me through the process? So when you then find out that somebody's already started a construction because you didn't get the application, what happens? Are they told they've got to stop? I mean, I know there's consequences to that, but it's a way of saying, hang on a second, you shouldn't be doing this yet.
Peter, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to deal specifically with this one, but in general terms, on an enforcement investigation, when we get those reports, an officer will visit. If it's obvious from the visit that there has been a breach of planning control, then the owner is advised to cease work. At that point, it's made very clear that any work that continues is at the owner's own risk, because, as Mr. Harris said earlier, if an application is submitted and is found then to be unacceptable and refused, then that will follow up with formal enforcement action. So if someone continues work and seeks to complete the development, then they have more development to revert back to what it was previously. So it's made very clear that it's at their risk at that stage. There are other tools which are available to the authority to put a cease on work, a formal cease on work, which we would use in circumstances where there is a particular immediate danger. For example, if it was a highway safety issue, for example, or if there was development which was essentially irreversible. Now that might be particular works that would damage a heritage asset, for example, and we may seek to put an immediate stop on that work. But there's various tools, and I think it's very clear, I think, here that there is quite decisive enforcement action taken on those cases where it is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Jones.
Just following on from that point briefly, Chair, this application has a construction environmental management plan attached to the conditions. The officer said that a lot of the construction had been completed, I think, but had now been paused, I think. So where it says within 1 month of the date of permission, do we take it that no further construction will be taking place during that period of a month until the applicant has put forward the construction environmental management plan? Because my worry is that if most of it's been done already, he or she could finish it off in that period of a month. Do we know from our knowledge of building control issues or whatever the issues are, whether that has been paused now until the construction environmental management plan has been submitted?
Peter.
Thank you, Chair. It's in my discussion with the applicant today, he's sort of very keen to make sure that he follows all the requirements of the authority from now onwards. So it's paused at the moment. He will be awaiting the decision of committee tonight, and will then follow up with that construction environmental management plan. In terms of the works that are still to be done, most of the excavation work has been done. There's still a small element of the excavation to go, but there are sort of quite a lot of additional works both within the basement and in what will be the patio area that will be covered by the construction environmental management plan as part of that as well. So yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Hamadishe.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions. The first one to do with the nature of the house. If it's an older building, a lot of these buildings have very insecure foundations, so I understand they're going 3 meters down. So what would be the final livable height of the basement? Because if it's a cinema room, for example, you might get away with, say, 2 meters. And if you look at the construction of the house, some of the levels are 2.65 meters, the top floor 2.5 meters. But what is the final livable height of the basement? Reason being is why it's important is houses you can kind of change the function of a room over time. So where you might have building regulation that say, if it's a cinema room, it has to be 2.5, etc. But then if it's going to be somebody's bedroom in the future, it might need to be higher. Just to understand what sort of considerations have been put in place for that. Also back to my colleague's comment regarding this retrospective application. Did it fall under building regs when they've done the work? For example, are they going through this process because work has happened and you risk compromising your neighbours? Because when you're doing a basement conversion, you got to have a lot of safeguards in like piling and all that kind of stuff, yeah, and your tanking has to be exact. So is there any assurances to the neighbours that their properties have not been damaged by the work already being done So are we doing 2 steps, retrospectively saying this is going to be a good build, blah, 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 and are we willing to put our stamp of approval that our neighbours, the neighbours' properties are not going to be compromised by the basement? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the foundations themselves, the property is a property that was built in 1986, so it was sort of rebuilt at that stage. The foundations, as I say, I was in the basement area today, and the foundations go for the whole depth of the extension, so they would be, as I say, that sort of 3 metre, I would suggest. In terms of the ceiling height of the finished room, obviously at the moment it's the sort of exposed sort of concrete floor above, but it's sort of well above what would be required for a normal room. I wouldn't anticipate it being used as a bedroom in terms of and I take the point that you're sort of alluding to, that they may say a cinema room and a playroom, but what's to stop it then sort of going through to extra bedrooms? Now, one of the conditions that we've put on is condition 2, which would prevent the change of use of the dwelling to house of multiple occupation. And in my experience, it would be typically that use that would maybe encourage a bedroom use at a basement level. With it remaining as a single dwelling, it's probably unlikely that would be a proposal that a family would decide to use the basement as a bedroom. They would planning. You have to look at the reasonable likelihood of what's going to occur in the future, and I think with that condition preventing the HMO, I think there is sufficient comfort within that condition that the reasonable likelihood is that it would be used as a cinema room, a playroom, an office, something along those lines in terms of an ancillary use. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Any other member? I now hand over to the Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Move approval of the planning application under discussion 264 St Margaret's Banks, Rochester, with conditions 1 to 4.
Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. The recommendation is for approval with conditions. Those for?
That's 14, Chair.
Those against?
None.
Right. We'll now move on to sorry. The record. Sorry. What am I doing? Agenda item 6 is approved. We now move on to agenda item 7, planning application for 39B Bush Road, Cuxton. Change of use from hairdressers to office for use as a taxi company. Aaron will be presenting this application, so over to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Chairperson. This site plan shows the application site 39B Bush Road, which is located within the Cuxton village boundary and is within the Cuxton village centre. The rear parking area associated with the application is accessed from the side road, May Street, and this application is for a change of use from Barber's Class E to sui generis use as a taxi office. The property has previously been used as a Barber's, with the adjacent property currently in use as a hairdresser's. Whilst the upper floors are in use as flats, there are no external changes proposed as part of the application, only internal stud partition walls in order to create 2 separate offices. Objections have been received in relation to transport concerns and the hours of operation. Highways have advised that the parking demand associated with the change of use can be absorbed within the parking available on site, and the applicant has confirmed that these offices will be used by 3 full-time office-based staff, with all bookings managed by phone or digitally. Taxi drivers will operate from their own home address and will not visit the site, and the office will not accept walk-in bookings from members of the public. As a result, conditions 4 and 5 have been drafted to cover these concerns. And the proposed hours of operations, although outside of the previous use hours of operations, they would not be considered unreasonable in a mixed-use area. This slide shows views from around the surrounding street scene from Bush Road. And this slide shows the rear parking area and images of May Street. The application is recommended by officer for approval.
Thank you, Aaron. Any members? Councillor Peake.
In the report, it says office use shall be operated, sorry, it's page 32. Operated as a taxi office for pre-booked taxis only, and at no point shall the office be used by members of the public for the purpose of walk-in bookings or as a waiting room. How will we know whether that is actually being kept to, please?
Okay, Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant has advised how the system they use, how it operates, and that's been deemed as being acceptable. Obviously, if they were accepting bookings, then the planning enforcement could take place, but conditions have been drafted to secure those.
Thank you. Councillor Peake, did you have something to add?
No, but sorry, maybe I wasn't listening carefully enough, but how would we know in the first place?
So the applicant has advised how the taxi system works. It's pre-booked via online, it's pre-booked via a system, and the taxi drivers operate from their own addresses. So basically they would get, the addresses things would be sent through them. They've advised that they wouldn't accept walk-in as part of their application, and conditions have been drafted that basically say we don't allow walk-ins. So if they were accepting walk-ins, then we would open a planning enforcement case.
Chairman,
Yeah, okay,
Chairperson,
Dave, yeah.
sorry, Chrissy. Chairperson, thank you very much. It's like all potential, or most potential breaches of planning control. We are reliant on local people, parish councils, local people to draw to our attention if there is a breach. In this case, if they were having walk-ins, and if it was causing a problem, we would very quickly be advised by local residents and the parish council, and then, as Aaron says, we would open an enforcement case and we'd investigate.
Any other members? I don't think it's flashing. Is that working?
No, it's Councillor Pearce.
Okay, right. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just to say that we had 2 similar properties like this in Who where they were shops, small little shops, and then they were converted to houses. So it's fortunate for the residents there that this is still remaining a shop because it could easily change. So yeah, I'm happy to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Any other member? No. I now move over to the Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Move the application at agenda item 7, 39B Bush Road, Cuxton, with conditions 1 to 5 as set out in the report.
Is that seconded? Thank you. The recommendation is for approval with conditions. Those for?
That's 14, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 7, planning application for 39 Bush Road, Cuxton is approved. We'll now move on to agenda item 9, the report on constitutional issues. Over to you, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Members, looking to get the views and the opinions of this planning committee. The final decision on these constitutional issues will be a matter for full council, but to assist full council in making those decisions, as these would affect this planning committee, that's why we'd like to take to seek your views. There's two aspects. One is in relation to the scheme of delegation, and the second is in relation to the code of good practice, and particularly in relation to ward councillors speaking. So in relation to the scheme of delegation, what we want is for this planning committee to focus its time and attention on cases which will make a difference, i.e. the big schemes or the controversial schemes. So the vast majority of applications are relatively straightforward, and we can deal with them under Office of Delegated Powers to enable you to have the time to focus on those cases. When we went into to COVID and we were dealing with planning committees remotely, we did a temporary change of the scheme of delegation to assist the operation of the committee at that time, working very closely with the planning spokes. And it worked very well, and it focused the committee's attention on those ones they should be. When we came out of COVID and we went back into the room again, we put forward the suggestion at that point in time that temporary scheme be made permanent. Members of the planning committee then felt that rather than merely do that, we should look at the scheme in more detail and just see if there's a better way of dealing with the delegation. So that's exactly what we've done, and I have circulated this to members. So the changes we're suggesting is getting members to focus on planning applications, i.e. where there is a planning balance that the members can bring some discussion, some debate to. So you'll see on page 55, the first red underlined areas is those non-planning applications, the lawful development certificates, the prior approvals, where it's a technical consideration. It's either lawful or it's not. There's no planning balance there for members to really get involved with. So to take them out of coming to planning committee, for them to be determined under delegated powers. Then as we go down here, where the applicant is the council, and the proposed development is contrary to local planning policy, that must and should come to this committee. Further down, we're looking to clarify, and I think it was Councillor Pearce that very helpfully made this suggestion, in terms of the parish council. Just because they object to an application would mostly of the time trigger it to come to committee. But there may be cases where they object on very minor schemes, and they want those concerns considered very carefully by officers, but they don't necessarily feel that the scheme merits consideration by the committee. So, in those instances, that is under little 8, parish councils can object, but say still happy for the application to be determined by committee. The additional area of change is where we get letters of objection, where at the moment the trigger to committee is 3 or more relevant letters. Members, your experience over the last nearly a year now is you've had some applications come before you because of that trigger, and there's been little or no debate on those cases, and you've been very happy to follow officer recommendation. So on that basis, we're looking to increase that trigger from 3 to 5 letters of representation. And then the final change relates to matters of trees. And when I went through this, I felt that there needed some clarification as to what is considered there and what could be determined under delegated powers by officers and what would rightly come before this committee. So hopefully that's clear to members. Then in relation to the ward councillor speaking at committee, what we've had is I was going to say a gentleman's agreement, but it's not. It's because obviously there's ladies and gentlemen here. There's almost a an informal agreement over certain aspects. And what the previous chairman of this committee said is, you don't like informal agreements. What you want is something which is very clearly set out, that this committee understands and all members understand very clearly, so they know when they can come to committee and speak, and they know how long they've got to speak for and whether they can speak again. So what we're suggesting here is that ward councillors wishing to speak have to register with the chairperson or myself or the Democratic Services officer by 5:15 on the day of the planning committee. They will only be able to address the committee once on an individual application, with the following exceptions. If the ward councillor represents a single member ward, they will be permitted to address the committee twice, i.e. if the application is deferred and then it comes back again, they can speak for a second time. In respect to all other wards, if the application is deferred, the ward councillor who has spoken will not be permitted to come back and address the committee on the same application unless it has significantly changed, and in which case they will be allowed to come back and speak. What could happen, though, is that when the application first comes to committee, one ward councillor speaks, may get deferred for whatever reason, come back again, a different ward councillor could speak on it, and they would both be allowed 5 minutes. So we're just, and that's been the informal agreement of this committee, so just seeking to make that permanent. So members happy to have comments on this that we can feed back to full council when they consider these. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dave. Any member, any comments? Well, Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just on the parish council side of things, our parish councils would, like Dave explained, they would put in a representation, not always objecting, but sometimes just commenting on applications, and they would feel that it doesn't necessarily need to go to committee because they're so minor, a lot of them, but it would trigger it automatically in some cases, especially if it was an objection. So personally, I'm happy with this because it means that if the parish council wants it to go to committee, they have to specifically say, we want this application to go to committee, and then all others, it will basically be delegated authority with officers, and we're happy with that. Thank you.
Any other member?
Thank you, Chair. It was just about the move from 3 to 5 letters of representation, and you call them relevant letters. Could you just explain what is meant by a relevant letter and why you chose 5?
Chairman, apologies for laughing. 5 was the previous chairman said 5 to me, so that's it wasn't me that choosing 5. So there was no informed reason for that from me, other than me thinking, well, 3 is too low, and the experience shows it's too low. Relevant letters is if someone just writes in and says, I object because it's going to affect my property value, that's not a planning consideration. So I wouldn't consider that to be a relevant letter. But if they come, if they say it's going to impact on my outlook, the objections that you've heard tonight, they're relevant. But it's only if it's not a planning issue, then it becomes not relevant.
Any other member? Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think members' role probably needs to be stressed in all this from 2 sides of the coin. First of all, the importance of the role of a ward member in being able to bring issues to the planning committee and then to be able to speak on them in the terms that are set out in the report. And secondly, if a member has any involvement at all in a planning issue of any sort, that as I understand it, and the Chief Planning Officer please correct me if I'm wrong through you, Chair, but as I understand it, if there's any member involvement in any planning issue, such as a planning application, that would automatically come to the committee, same as it would if there were an officer who was closely working with planning issues put in a planning application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairperson, thank you very much. And on those two things, absolutely, Councillor Jones, it's important that the ward councillors do feel that if they want something brought to committee, they can do so. What they would need to do is explain to me or the legal officer why, in writing, why they feel the application should be determined by the planning committee rather than officers. What are the issues that they feel that the planning committee need to factor in? I'm very happy to have those discussions and help them on that. But they also need to articulate the planning reasons for that call-in. So just saying, I've had phone calls from 5 residents, 6 residents, is not a reason to trigger it. They've got to give me their planning reasons for calling in. And then I just want to make this point. There is an expectation previously from this committee that if a ward councillor triggered an application to come before committee, this committee wanted the ward councillor to, if possible, to attend and explain, and take their 5 minutes to explain why they've triggered it to committee, because it's taking members' time, and it's only reasonable they should do that. And then the second point, Councillor Jones, you're absolutely right. If a councillor is an applicant, the application must come to this committee. It cannot be dealt with under delegated powers.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Did you have anything else to add? No. Councillor Howcross-Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I really like the fact that we need to simplify the necessary and eliminate the unnecessary. And I'm really proud of you and your team because, you know, the amount of appeals you're winning and certainly, you know, the planning presentations that we are able to attend, there's a few this week, you know, do set the ground for us to make informed decisions about our community. I think 5 is a good number. I think 3 is definitely too small. So thank you for this discussion.
Over you to Dave.
Chairperson, I just want to thank Councillor Howcroft-Scott for those comments. I'm really proud of my team as well, and you meet hopefully many of them at the presentations and at this committee, but thank you for those comments. I'll make sure they're passed on.
Thank you. Councillor Peake.
Well, just following on from that, already said, but I want to also vocalise, I'm pleased with this report. I'm pleased to see this, and the key to me is you're pinning down validity. It's not enough for somebody to say, oh, I want to talk about it, for whatever reasons they may be, without casting an aspersion on people. The very fact they've got to have validity, I think this is a very, very important step, so thank you for the report.
Any other member? Over to Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'll read out the recommendations and I'll try and do so whilst mastering the skill of both reading from my screen and speaking to the microphone. Recommendation 1.1, the committee is asked to recommend the changes to the employee delegation scheme as set out in Appendix 1 to the report to full council for approval. And recommendation 1.2, the committee is asked to recommend the changes to the planning code of good practice as set out in Appendix 2 to this report to full council for approval. I so move, Chair.
Thank you. Is the report supported? Oh, sorry, seconded.
Thank you.
Yep. Is the report supported? Yes. Thank you. Thank you, members. That is now the end of tonight's Planning Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.